Cathedral of Oviedo in Spain. The congregation has gathered for a very special service. The veneration of a faded, worn piece of cloth that some believe to be one of the most valuable religious relics in the world. It's Good Friday, and hundreds of worshippers have come to venerate a simple square of cloth. The tattered material is known by its Latin name, the Sudarium, a cloth used in Roman times to wipe sweat from a face. Many who worship here believe this cloth was wrapped around the face of Christ after his death. But this could be much more than an object of veneration, a source of genetic information linked to the divine. If this is the actual Sudarium of Christ, it could hold a sample of his human form on earth. The cloth seems soaked in blood. Could this be the blood of Christ? Mark Guskin is an author and scholar of classical languages. He's come to Oviedo to investigate the relics said to be the face cloth of Christ. Research has been carried out on the Sudarium by a Spanish group dedicated to the study of relics linked to Jesus. The group's research has revealed blood samples of an AB blood group, which is common to the Middle East. Current tests date the cloth back to at least the 8th century.
One of the things that can skew carbon dating and actually make you come up with a wrong date is oil. Any kind of oily residue on the cloth would lead to that. And that is something that is on the Sudarium. For many, many centuries, the Sudarium was kept in a candlelit atmosphere. In fact, there is wax on the Sudarium that has dripped onto it from a candle.
Mark uses a replica cloth for practical experiments.
There is a hole in the middle of the cloth that's been burnt onto it. We can see here on the replica is actually a burn mark. The way the cloth was venerated in the past, nobody knew about contamination and the effects that it could have on later dating. There is lipstick on the cloth. There are residues of paint. And all of this is contamination that could lead to an erroneous dating.
It's commonly thought that just one shroud covered Christ's body. But the Gospel of St. John suggests that a separate cloth was used to cover Christ's face. Mark has discovered a medieval manuscript from a library in Rheims, France, which makes reference to a Sudarium as far back as the 6th century. He contacts Michael Hesseman, a publisher of many books on holy relics.
Question I'd like to ask you. I was digging around in archives and looking at manuscripts, and I came across this 6th century text, and it's talking about a group of pilgrims who went to the Holy Land. They say the Sudarium was in a monastery that was in a cave near the city of Jerusalem.
I think I know what you're talking about. You're referring to the pilgrim of Piacenza, who in 570 visited the Holy Land.
Yes, yeah, the Piacenza pilgrim.
The itinerary of the pilgrim of Piacenza is like a treasure map. You just have to follow it. You have to follow the landmarks he gives. And he says, but before he was in the monastery of St. John at the River Jordan, the baptism site, and he walked to Jericho. So you already know the location. It has to be between the baptism site and Jericho, but close to the river, because he says close to the river.
Yeah, that's
Jordan.
right, he does.
Then, of course, you have to have a rock face. Generally, the Jordan Valley is very flat. You only have rocks when you have a wadi, which is, you know, a dried out from a river. And indeed, this is the only wadi between the baptism site and Jericho. There's just no other monastery which would fit the description.
To find out if there's a place that might match the description of the 6th century cave monastery, Mark's quest moves from Spain to the heart of the Holy Land. Investigative journalist Noam Shalev has an intriguing mission: to find a possible location for a legendary cave monastery said to have held a holy Sudarium, the cloth used to cover the face of the crucified Jesus. His first lead: to find the place where Jesus was baptized. Jesus is said to have been baptized in a river near the ancient city of Jericho. But today, that's right in the middle of a military zone on the border with Jordan.
אהלן, מה העניינים? בסדר. אז אנחנו נוסעים אחריכם פנימה, אנחנו 3 מכוניות. אוקיי, יש בדרך עוד, בדרך לפני אתר הטבילה יש עוד כנסיות? יש מנזרים נטושים.
Noam manages to persuade the soldiers to let him in, but he's only allowed under military escort.
This area is strictly off limits. It's a military zone. Very dangerous to go around here. There are amazing buildings here from the time of early Christianity, but we cannot visit them because there are so many landmines around us that it is too dangerous to try, you know, even to set a foot outside this road. There are some places here that have not been touched for hundreds of years. It's an amazing area.
This is the place on the troubled border between Israel and Jordan, where some believe Jesus was baptized. According to a medieval manuscript, pilgrims came here on their way to an ancient monastery dedicated to St. John, a monastery said to have held the cloth that covered the face of Jesus.
Well, it does say St. John Greek Orthodox Convent. I wish I could go to the area behind this monastery, but the problem are the landmines, so many of them around here.
Could this church stand on the site of an ancient monastery of the same name? And are there any caves nearby? Noam spots another church in the distance, just outside the militarized zone. It's the Church of St. Gerasimus.
Maybe you can help me.
Okay.
I'm looking for a cave monastery around this area that goes back to 5th century AD.
Right.
Do you know of anywhere around here?
Well, there is a cave somewhere east from here,
Okay.
that it's believed that the Saint Erasmus lived there also. And there is a tank that the Israelis left there on a hill. So if you see that, you know that's the area where the old cave is.
A short drive from the church, Noam finds the shell of an Israeli tank on the top of a hill, as described to him. He starts to explore.
This might be it.
Could this abandoned place be the site of the cave monastery described by the 6th century pilgrims? A hiding place for a Sudarium? The face cloth of Jesus.
Actually, the location is perfect. We're just about 2 kilometers from the Jordan River. Totally desolate, nobody here. Great place.
The manuscript also relates an eerie story of 7 children who lived alongside a Sudarium and never left the confines of the caves. They spent their whole time in the cells and were fed and looked after by locals. When one child died, another was appointed to take his place.
But such cuts into the rock can be used for a candle, maybe even to place a cross in the entrance.
Noam has found separate caves similar to those described in the 6th century manuscript. But can he find a likely shrine which may have housed the Sudarium?
Let's see what's inside. It's dark, it's isolated, hidden, perfect.
Noam believes the location and layout of this neglected network of caves is similar to the place described in the Reims manuscript.
I think I found it.
You think you've found it? And are you sure? It fits in with the description? You sure you've got the right place?
An ancient story says the sweat cloth that covered the face of Christ was preserved as a holy relic among the hills of ancient Palestine.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But the discovery of a place that seems to match the tale says nothing about the authenticity of the supposed Sudarium worshipped in a Spanish cathedral.
And
Israeli archaeologist Orit Shamir focuses the investigation back on the alleged relic itself to find out if the supposed face cloth does date back to the 1st century.
to the Roman and Byzantine period.
As head of textiles for the Israel Antiquities Authority, she's in charge of all the archaeological textiles discovered there.
Do you mind if I show you a few pictures of the Sudarium, microscopic images?
Oh, wonderful. Where is it coming from? You can see exactly the fibers and the spinning and weaving. Very good quality. We don't see any mending. We don't see, any
Patches?
patches. Yes. We can see the holes of the needle.
They believe to be from the thorns that were on Jesus' hand. I think so.
It is hard to see it. I don't believe it. Or maybe. I don't know.
A crucial question is whether the Sudarium is made of the kind of fabric dating back to the time of Christ.
This weaving is very simple when you connect the warp and the weft in a very simple way. It looks like the textiles from the Byzantine and Roman period.
So we may talk roughly about the time of Jesus Christ.
It could be also later, for example, from the Byzantine period. But I don't think it belongs to the medieval period, for example.
And is this typical to what they did in the land of Israel?
No, it is typical to Europe. They didn't use this spinning in Israel. We have a few textiles which are spun like this one, but they are imported to Israel.
There's only one example of a 1st century Jerusalem burial cloth to use as a comparison. Just like the Sudarium, the cloth is a superior imported fabric.
The shroud is made of wool, and it was imported from Greece or Italy, and it is in very good quality. I mean, they didn't use a textile which was patched and mended, but they bought it especially for this purpose. Also, you can see his hair, even after 2000 years, is still shiny.
Like this 1st century material, the Spanish Sudarium also seems to be a high-quality import, and its weave suggests it could be from the right period.
Identify.
You can see here the weaving mistakes. It's funny to see it.
But many supposedly holy relics are medieval forgeries. Further examination of the Oviedo Sudarium is required. In the Spanish capital of Madrid, a research group specializing in holy relics analyzed the configuration of stains on the Sudarium. The patterns of blood and other markings are complex.
By reproducing these bloodstains in the laboratory, we do know an awful lot about the position that the body was in and how long it was in each position while the particular bloodstains were formed. Now, when the cloth was first wrapped around the head, we know that it was the head of an adult male with long hair and a beard who was dead. These stains could not have been formed with any kind of breathing movement.
Forensic evidence always tells a story. In this case, could it be the distressing evidence of a real crucifixion?
We know that the body was in a vertical position with the arms upright and outstretched. Now, the initial idea was to wrap the cloth all the way around the head, but most probably the head would have been stuck to the arm as such, because rigor mortis tends to set in very, very quickly after a violent and traumatic death. So it was folded back on itself as such, leading to the parallel sets of stains. Now, the body was left in this position for between 45 minutes to 1 hour. Now, the arms were then moved down, the cloth was then wrapped all the way around the head, and the crease marks show us that it was then tied up in a knot. The final group of bloodstains can only have been formed by the body being carried, because the movement, the jolting movement of carrying the body, led to the liquid, rather than seeping through the nose and nostrils, more like gushing out. And somebody was deliberately pressing the cloth to deliberately gather in all the blood, which according to Jewish belief is the lifeblood. That's where the soul is. And they were taking every possible care to make sure that no blood escaped and that all the blood would be buried with the person.
The forensic evidence seems to tell a gruesome story. But is it a story of a real crucifixion?
The bloodstains on the Sudarium, especially the ones at the back of the head, show us that his scalp had been pierced by various sharp objects. Now, this is perfectly compatible with a crown of thorns, and these are the stains that we do see on the Sudarium.
In It appears that the cloth may well have covered the face of a crucified victim. Amazingly, genetic material from that victim may have survived over the centuries. Many believe the Sudarium is the cloth which once covered the face of Jesus Christ. If they're right, there's a sensational possibility that the cloth may hold the physical remains of Jesus, and even a sample of his DNA.
This is the remaining sample of the Sudarium that we get after the DNA structure.
This is the result from a stained area of the Sudarium. So we can see the amount of DNA that we have. This is the fragment. And with this information we can go through the sequencing method to obtain the whole sequence. The sample that we have analyzed from the Sudarium definitely contains mitochondrial DNA. This is the type of DNA that we use for forensic investigation, for example for missing person, and also to analyze old samples like bones or something like that.
Mitochondrial DNA follows the genetic line through the mother.
This sample has no detectable DNA from the father.
Huge advances in genetic science have led to the sensational possibility that the DNA of Jesus Christ is locked in the vaults of a Spanish laboratory.